the colonies. Mordant House knew all your secrets. It protected the humans' fear against all threats. And good luck if that threat was you. You need that chair, or can you walk? And at last, Idris shifted around enough to recognize the narrow, suspicious face of Hevea Mundi. If you take my arm, I can walk. Fine. Mundi helped him up. The soldiers looked daggers, but none of them would challenge Mordant House. So, Idris said, as Mundi helped him out of the lounge, against a tide of panicked refugees. You have some Mordant House ship or something that can get me out there? Please don't tell me I'm just trading one kidnapping for another. His heart sank when Mundi said, not exactly. But at least they were leaving the Sepulchrave far behind as they moved around the orbital ring towards the shabbier docks. They had to jostle and fight through every corridor, but Mundi seemed to have a way of finding every gap in the current to get ahead. Idris just let himself be tugged along. The man's way with crowds was like navigating unspace to the uninitiated, something magical and mysterious. They were well into the docking band that dealt with freight now, though the only freight shipping here was more people. And all the while, the architect was getting closer. Agent Mundi, he said at last, where are we going? Where do you think? I'm not going to be some spook asset. Idris pulled back, trying to resist. He might as well fight gravity. Mundi's long, boned frame bought him a lot of leverage. I refuse to be some Black Ops sneak pilot for your assassins. Mundi stopped. Black Ops sneak pilot? He queried. That's a job description where you come from, is it? I'm not. Telemier, I am risking a great deal on my assessment of you, not least my job. So just shut your yap and come with me, would you? Because right now, I'm attracting all the bad kind of paperwork, and I am just desperate to get started on the last report of my career after I drop you off. He gave Idris's arm a final yank, hit a door release with his elbow, and they were standing in a familiar dock. And there was the Vulture God. Idris looked from the ship to Mundi and back. Solace was heading towards them, her eyes on the Mordant Houseman. I didn't think you'd do it, she said. Well, I reckon you and I are both exceeding our orders today, Mundi replied. You're shipping out with them, right? You want a berth? He laughed harshly. That would just about put the nail in the coffin, wouldn't it? No, I'll stay here and clean up the mess I made. Telemier? Idris jumped. What? I met you. What? I sat down with you, remember? We had a chat, back before the harvest turned up and we had to part ways. Right now, I am really hoping I'm as good a judge of character as I want to be. You want a ship? Here's your ship. If you can talk them into it. I've also got you departure clearance, at least until someone clocks on and overrules me. Go use it. Then the man was retreating, seeming to shift crabwise out of the hangar before vanishing, because Mordant House never did anything in a straightforward way. Idris turned to the ship, the unlovely, oft-repaired scavenger hauler that was the Vulture God. The drone bay hatch was open, but he couldn't see any of the crew. I know you all heard that, he called. Well? Okay, are we going or not? Ollie's voice boomed from the speakers. Because I just spent 10 minutes getting us all ready to leave. Just get your ass on board. Her too. When he reached command, they were all there. Ollie in her walker, Chris in Rollo's chair, Kittering in his own, and trying too, to his surprise. Their arms were still mangled, but they had new legs, and their face had been restored to its phantom glory. Solace stepped in behind him, and leant on the back of the pilot's chair as he took his place at the board. "Look," he started awkwardly. "You're going to say we don't need to come, that it's dangerous," Chris told him. "Idris, in the general ranking of people important enough to get a berth off planet, just where do you think we fit? If we're not getting out on the Vulture, we're not getting out at all. So we're sticking on board, thank you very much." "Speak for yourself," Trine declared. "Some of us are an ambassador." "Taking her out," Ollie announced, and the ship's bones creaked around them as they lifted off from the dock and passed out of the station's gravitic field into open vacuum. "Idris, she's yours when you're ready. Take her away." He'd wanted the crew in suspension beds, even for the stutter jump in system, but there wasn't time. They'd been through it before anyway. They were practically unspace veterans. He argued the case as he slung the Vulture God away from the orbital, ignoring the angry comms chatter they left in their wake. A couple of Hugh military skiffs hailed them, but they were too little, too late. Enough politics. He sketched out the maths of the stutter jump, always with the sense of Berlenhof as a crushing weight poised at his back. His target destination was unexpectedly complicated, a nightmare maze of gravitic distortions, even without the architect itself, with its disproportionate mass shadow. Seeing the mess he was dropping into, he couldn't quite believe he'd lifted the Heaven's Sword out of it. But then, it wasn't just the enemy out there anymore. The fighting started. Even at this remove, he could sense the slight shudder as the Thunderchild and its impromptu allies deployed their gravitic weapons. They were trying to crack the substance of the architect as its ponderous will sought to pin them down. And the god was in, falling away from the real into the dream that was unspace, and out, exploding back into existence and into the thick of it. For a moment, he could still see the ragged shawl of space-time, bent 1,000 ways by the fighting. The Partheni warship was deploying its mass loom, 4 times the power of the batteries they used at the first Battle of Berlenhof. Idris saw a spray of cracks flower across those crystal mountains as the strike hit home. But they blurred into wholeness just a moment later, as the architect reshaped its own substance to heal. Further off, Idris's instruments reported on the Blake, a colonial-built monster shaped like a lump hammer. It had launched a withering storm of super-accelerated shot from its cannon, most of which whirled off to oblivion as the architect leant on the universe to shift the gradient. Solace took her place at Idris's back, medkit ready in her hands. Chris and Kittering were just staring at the monstrosity dominating space outside. "We're too late," the Partheni whispered. "Not too late," Idris insisted.